October 29, 1929. Black Tuesday erases $14 billion from the market in a single trading session. Every history book marks this as the day the Great Depression began. They're wrong. 14 months later, on December 11, 1930, a single bank in New York fails, and almost nobody remembers its name. The Bank of the United States, 62 branches, 400,000 depositors, mostly immigrant garment workers who trusted it with their life savings. Despite the name, it has no government backing at all. False rumor that the bank is insolvent sends a mob of depositors into the streets of the Bronx. In hours, they pull millions in cash out of the vaults. It is still, technically, just one bank in one city. The bank holds over $200 million in deposits, the largest bank failure in American history at that point. New York's clearinghouse is asked to arrange a rescue merger to stop the bleeding. The bankers refuse. The Federal Reserve in Washington watches and does not intervene. Within days, the panic jumps to New Jersey, then Pennsylvania, then banks across the entire country. Over the next 3 years, more than 9,000 American banks will collapse in the same way. The 1929 crash was a wound on paper. Stock prices, not people's money. This was the moment that wound became a nationwide hemorrhage, and it was still only the beginning. In 1913, a Russian Jewish immigrant named Joseph Marcus opened a tiny bank on Manhattan's Lower East Side. His customers were garment workers and pushcart peddlers that downtown banks refused to even open a window for. Marcus gave his storefront bank a name far bigger than its size, the Bank of the United States. It had no federal charter and no government backing, just a name that sounded like one. New York regulators actually debated forcing a name change in the 1920s. They backed down. That single unresolved decision as intended. Word spread through crowded tenements. Here, finally, was a bank that would take an immigrant's dollar. By the end of the 1920s, immigrant families trusted this fake-sounding name more than banks with real government backing. One branch became a network of New York City. Joseph Marcus died in 1927. They inherited something almost no other bank in America could claim, more individual depositors than anyone. But Marcus's son and Singer wanted more than a bank built on nickels and dimes. They were about to turn 4 in New York real estate. Joseph Marcus understood something rival bankers never bothered to learn. A name can outsell a balance sheet. In 1913, he opened his Lower East Side institution under a title almost impossible to forget, the Bank of the United States. He started it with just $100,000 in capital, a fraction of what real national banks held. No federal charter backed it, and no government guarantee stood behind a single dollar inside it. By the late 1920s, control had passed to his son Bernard Marcus and a partner named Saul Singer, and the deception was still working perfectly. New York's own banking regulators considered forcing a name change, admitting in writing that depositors were confused. Some officials worried changing the name now might itself spark a panic, so nothing changed. The bank had opened before the naming rule even existed, and the loophole let the name stand. The confusion meant one thing. Immigrant depositors from the garment district believed Washington itself stood behind their savings. By 1930, the bank had grown to 62 branches across New York City, the widest network any single bank in America had built. Not one of those branches carried a shred of federal insurance. The FDIC didn't exist yet. It wouldn't for 3 more years. For now, the illusion of a federal bank was more powerful than the truth of a private one. That illusion was about to be tested by a merger deal gone wrong, and a rumor no one could stop. Joseph Broderick, New York's top banking regulator, made one last attempt to save it. On December 10, 1930, he summoned the city's most powerful bankers to an emergency session. The plan: 4 rival banks would swallow Bank of the United States and absorb every dollar it owed. Manufacturers, Trust, Chase National, Corn Exchange, and Public National were asked to co-sign the rescue. All it would take was $30 million, split among men who had that much in pocket change. The clearinghouse had quietly rescued weaker banks before, for far less. But Bank of the United States served immigrants, tailors, pushcart peddlers, not their world. Inside the room, prejudice and self-interest tangled until nobody could tell them apart. By 4:45 in the morning on December 11th, the consortium walked away from the table. No merger, no guarantee, no safety net. Hours later, Bank of the United States did not open its doors. It was instantly the largest bank failure in American history, bigger than any before it. Word tore through the tenements of the Bronx within hours, and in cities that had never heard of the bank, depositors started asking the same question about their own. The men in that room thought they were containing one failing bank. They had just lit the fuse for a panic that would not. December 11th. Doors of the Bank of the United States do not open. Nearly 400,000 depositors discover their savings are frozen overnight. It is, at that moment, the single largest bank failure in American history. Many assumed from its name alone that Washington stood behind it. It didn't. It was a private bank, and no government check was coming. Police on horseback hold back the crowds gathering outside its Bronx headquarters. But the real is the fear. Depositors at banks with no connection to the failure start lining up anyway. A bank is failing. Repeats in Philadelphia, then Cleveland, then a dozen more cities. In the 1920s, roughly 600 banks failed in an average year. A grim, manageable churn. By the end of 1930, that number has more than doubled. Nationwide, depositors watch 853 million disappear into suspended banks in a single year. There is still no deposit insurance in America. None. If your bank failed, your money simply ceased to exist. 11 days after the doors closed in the Bronx, the contagion has reached cities the bank never even touched. And the men who refuse to save one small bank are about to learn what one failure can cost an entire nation. December 11th, 1930. The Bank of the United States shuts its doors for the last time. Its very name had reassured 400,000 depositors. Many assumed Washington stood behind it. Nobody did. $200 million in deposits, frozen overnight, the largest bank failure in American history to that point. Days earlier, a rescue merger with stronger banks was on the table. It fell apart at the last minute. The New York. Within days, depositors from Chicago to trouble. Fear doesn't read a balance sheet. It just runs. By 1933, over 9,000 American banks have collapsed. The nation's money supply shrinks by a third. Credit vanishes. Factories go dark. Unemployment climbs toward 25%. 1 in 4 Americans out of work. In 1932, Washington finally creates a rescue fund. For thousands of banks, it comes a year too late. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt he insures the nation's deposits. The first insurance cap, 20 years to learn it. The lesson outlives every boom since. A crash and trust, once gone, empties every account in the country, not just the one that failed. What if regulators had saved one bank in New York that December? We'll never know. We only know what its funeral cost the world.